No! Hello everybody, welcome to another video. Today there was supposed to be a live stream, and this sort of was a live stream, talking about the specialization changes and just general game balance stuff. It was mentioned a couple of times on the stream, and this is very much true. This is pretty much the biggest balance patch ArenaNet have done on the game since it launched. It's a really curious thing to me because a few weeks ago I did a video talking about my top requested or wanted features for Feature Pack 3, and I barely dared to suggest they could balance things that much at all. I really wasn't expecting that much huge to change, and here we are on the cusp of one of the biggest changes to combat and balance that we've ever seen. So a few weeks ago also we did have another live stream from the devs that they knew was going to take a long time. They knew it was going to take about 4 hours, and they were going to show us in-game every class and all of their work in progress stuff on exactly what was changing baseline with the classes and the specializations. Today we were supposed to see a similar stream that was going to be shorter and was the finalized stuff. So we were going to see everything as well, but this stream seems to have been plagued by a multitude of issues. Normally, Ready Up would be going live on Friday. However, for whatever reason, I guess because this was so unwieldy and large and complicated, it didn't go live on Friday. It ended up getting cancelled and put off till Monday. Monday already, and this week is quite packed because of E3, because we know we have big announcements coming up to do with guild halls and Colin, and there's their own streams going on there. So it's like a really forced, squeezed in thing. They must have a lot of stuff that they know they've got coming up, and unfortunately even today it's been plagued by issues. There were pretty substantial delays before the stream even began, and then because this was going on, I believe, during the Ubisoft conference for E3, Twitch went down. Twitch in general just completely took a poop, and we were kind of left in the dark. The devs said that they did basically continue to do the show, and it was recorded, and this will go up on YouTube, but for now, for when I make this video for you guys, we only got to see a little bit of the stuff. We got to Ranger, and then it stopped. Not only this, but the stream actually went on a lot longer than I believe Grouch was expecting it to. At first, people were saying, oh, you know, it could be about an hour long, and then it seemed like it could be about 2 hours long, and then we were well past 2 hours into the stream, and we had only really scratched the surface. We'd only done like 3 of the classes plus some generic combat changes. So it's just been a bit of a shame that so many issues have hit the live stream. I'm a little bit worried actually though, because I think what Grouch was trying to do and what the devs were trying to do with this stream was really honorable and really awesome. He had hundreds of slides prepared detailing all the changes to really try and give all that information to us, the community, you know, and this was going to cost them a lot of time. They were running over, but they were absolutely committed to giving this to all of us, and then Twitch went down anyway. It just seems to me that if I were in his position, if I were in the position of the people running live streams, you'd look at this as a bit of a nightmare day, and you'd be like, alright, we're never going to do this again. We're never going to go, like, full transparency like this again. I am just imploring you guys, though, to remember that they were trying to do something pretty cool here, and I would hope that they kind of see that even though this was, you know, issue after issue after issue, it's still worth it. I still want to see more streams like this in the future, because this was friggin' awesome, and a lot of us really do appreciate it. They get mad respect and props from me, even though it kind of messed up. Anyway, so I guess I'll talk to you guys about what was actually revealed on this stream. A lot of it's stuff we already knew from the previous one. Elementalist, for example, I actually jotted down every single thing about Elementalist, basically transcribed as they talked about it, and not too many changes have taken place. There have been odd announcements of things before this stream I was hoping for clarification on, like the blood magic changes to Necromancer, we didn't get to see, like the inspiration changes for Mesmer, we didn't get to see. We did get to see the arcane changes for Ellie, which were pretty minor, but we'll go over those in a second. And then even other stuff like in the previous stream we had that was like 4 hours, they were saying that they were going to classify a lot of existing skills into skill types, but a lot of it was like up in the air and they didn't know how they were going to do it. So Guardian's a great example. They didn't know how they were going to change those tomes into regular Guardian skills. Then later we had a forum post saying, hey, you know, the Tome of Wrath is going to become a shout that gives quickness when people activate in Fury, I believe. And the Healing Tome is going to become a signet that passively point-blank AoE heals, and then if you activate it, it restores everyone to 100% health. You know, like, these were cool ideas, and this stream was going to go go over them, but we never got to see that. For many of the classes, however, a couple we did get to see, and they were pretty revealing in some ways, especially like Ranger with traps, for example. Alright, so it did begin rehashing that blog post I've already done a video on called Dots and Dashes, where they talk, number one, about the movement skill stuff, and then they talk, number two, about the changes of condition damage. I won't go over the condition damage stuff here. They did give us specific formulas, but hey, whatever. The movement skill thing, they did say they recognized that there was a bit of controversy about this. There was a lot of discussion about it. A lot of people didn't really seem to like it. My opinion has swayed from not being so negative after reading a couple of like quite well thought out Reddit posts and some other things too, like the fact that quickness currently halves the distance you move when you use those abilities. Well, wouldn't that mean slow technically doubles the duration even though you're moving slowly? So if you super speed rocket boots with slow on you, are you going to move like an insane distance but really, really slowly? Or does it not work that way? Maybe this was some kind of an issue. They'd never elaborated too much, but they did say that for classes like the Necromancer specifically was called out. You know, a lot of people were disappointed about this change because the Reaper sounded really good and chill. It was relying on to keep close to people. And they were saying, look, you know, classes like the Necromancer, with this change, they are going to get, you know, that little bit of quality of life so that this isn't a huge problem for them. And that should be interesting to see as things go forward. So that was the generic stuff they talked about. The idea was we were going to have rotating devs presenting various classes. We only got 2 of them in the end. And this is pretty much what was unveiled. They did reveal that the damaging conditions were going to cap at 1,500 stacks. So you can put 1,500 bleeds on a foe, 1,500 poison, 1,500 confusion, and 1,500 burning on a foe all at once. 1,500 is actually a pretty good number because when you consider that most maps in Guild Wars 2 have a capacity of 150 players, that averages about 10 of these conditions per player. And, you know, Condi-oriented players are going to be putting a lot more than 10, and hopefully non-Condi players are going to be putting a lot less. You know, there's less of those kind of passive, oh, I'm randomly bleeding while I attack style traits there, which is pretty cool. So actually, it's pretty well balanced, and really, at 1,500, if you think about it, you probably won't ever see that cap be hit. They also did say, in terms of the condition damage stuff, something I never really thought of, and that's that Confusion I was very upset about because I realized that it had lost a lot of its flavor. However, if you are at like 30 stacks of Confusion on you, even though half of the damage is now just going damage over time, still at 30 stacks, if you use an ability, it's still going to chunk you really, really hard. So there's going to be situations still where they're impactful, oh god, don't use an ability, you're cripplingly scared to use an ability, is still there in Confusion. And actually, it might be heightened more than ever, because now we have the capacity to have like, and I'm not saying this will be a common thing, but we have the capacity to have like 60 Confusion stacks on us. And can you imagine how terrified you'd be to use an ability? Or even that temptation, it's like you get that feeling when you're stood on the top of a giant building or a bridge, and there's that little switch in your brain that's like, oh man, I could just drop off this right now. You're going to feel that with your skills, and you're going to be like, oh god, you know, this is scary. And I like that. One thing I thought Guild Wars 2's always missed out on is those almost like infinitely feeling scaling mechanics, you know, where truly ridiculous stuff can happen. At some point, someone will see an insane amount of conditions on them, and they're on a tanky enough setup to kind of feel them hit them hard, and that's going to be quite fun when it happens. They confirmed also, after reiterating that vulnerability will increase condition damage, other sources still aren't, so potions aren't going to be doing it, and traits that say, hey, you do 10% more damage while wielding your greatsword, and that's still not going to be raising your condition damage. Specifically, if you want to boost condition damage like through traits, they are specific traits that say, hey, this trait will increase your condition damage, and many of those traits too seem to have been nerfed back. So like, I think Ranger had one that meant poison did 50% more damage previously. Well, now that's only 33% more damage, because again, if we're dealing with massive poison stacks, like 80 poison on someone, the difference between 50% more damage and 33% more damage is suddenly a huge numeric, so they've kind of nerfed those and culled those back just a little bit. That's it pretty much for regular combat changes. Let's get on to the classes. Now, these are the ones that were revealed. I'll tell you guys straight away, so you can switch off the video if you want, because your class isn't there. Elementalist, which I wrote everything down, and I'll talk to you guys about with everything there. Then, what my plan was to do was, all the other classes, I was just going to pick out key things that caught my eye and differences and new stuff, and then talk to you guys about those. So I did this for Warrior, Engineer, and the Ranger. Ranger is precisely when the stream went down, and nothing was really revealed after that. However, Guild Wars 2 did tweet that these changes will be coming into game, not this Tuesday, not tomorrow, but the week after, the 23rd of June is when these come in. So we're waiting like 8 days. By the time you guys see this video, for those of you in my time zone, it's just 7 days for the change. So that was really cool to have confirmed as well, and I guess that was going to be their big finale, but it was a little bit ruined. Alright, so let's look at Elementalist first. This, of course, is the class that I main. I'm not going to do a huge critique, not too much change for Elementalist. They clarified some of the baseline changes, though, specifically like what skills were becoming what. Ether Renewal is becoming a cantrip. Doesn't really make much sense to me. I don't really like this. Cantrips are, like, defined by being instant activation, no? Ether Renewal is the opposite of that. That is the most opposite of that you could get on the Elementalist, but fine. It also had its cooldown increased slightly. Now, this is specifically because you can trait cantrips to give you a whole ton of other things, including reducing that cooldown back down again. So, that's why the cooldown has been increased. You can just trait it to be lower again. Tornado, too, has become a cantrip. Now, if that means that there's no more cast time associated with Tornado, I'll be very happy. And actually, I'll be happy not just for kind of quality of life reasons and for theme reasons, so that cantrips stay, you know, like these instant activation things, but I'll actually be happy too, because if we had an instant activation transform, we can do a lot of fun stuff again, like pick up a conjure weapon while toggling into the transform, and oh look, we get to be our tornado while wielding a fire greatsword and stuff like that. And I know that's probably broken, you should talk about it early, but still, if that ends up getting the game, very happy. And Whirlpool as well, just like Tornado, is going to be a cantrip. Now, there was an interesting note that they put on the base changes for the class. They said that Soothing Mist's radius had been nerfed to 300. Soothing Mist is the really terrible, awful 5-point trait in, or 1-point trait, sorry, in water magic that gives people, like, really slow, terrible regen while you're in water attunement. This has always been far too low to impact the game in any way, even if you max yourself as hard as you can into healing power. I have played a max benevolence elementalist in Magi's gear that converts that useless precision into even more healing power. I've played the highest possible healing power elementalist I can, and Soothing Mist is still terrible, negligible, and not worth looking at. And now they're saying that it's been nerfed in its radius down. So we'll get back to that in a second, because when they talk about water magic, and actually see a new traits appeared to do with it, which I'm very happy about. Then they talked a little bit about conjures. Now, we had heard that Ice Bow and Lightning Hammer were going to be getting some kind of a nerf. The Lightning Hammer nerf was completely outrageously stupid. It was not seeing play in any format particularly successfully. Sometimes Ellies would use it in dungeons, but often it was not meta. It was not that great, okay? And it would have been ridiculous for them to nerf it. This thing actually needs a buff in many respects if they want to see it get any serious play. There was no nerf here detailed to the Lightning Hammer, so maybe they listened to some of our outcries, and at least that isn't happening. Ice Bow 2 actually didn't get any nerfs. They just talked about how they wanted to incentivize people to use more than the skill 4. So actually, they just talked about buffs. The vulnerability on the skill 2 is now higher, and the damage on the skill 2 is higher, as well as the skill 3. Okay, sure. I still don't think the weapon works flavor-wise, and I do still think that, and this comes from a bursty Ellie in PvP that always cheeses out kills by, you know, channeling the 5, blinking next to someone, and then just using the storm. I do think it's a cheesy way to kill people. I think thematically the weapon still is broken and doesn't work, but maybe they decided, right, don't nerf it yet. Maybe nerf it on the day that they actually sit down and look at what the hell they're doing with conjure weapons. Seems like conjure weapons are still in that weird, clunky, awkward-ish space that they've always been in. Only upside is that now with the Condi changes, the Flame Axe may actually see a little bit more play, and in fact they detailed a whole ton of stuff. I'm not going to go over it with you guys, but a bunch of different burning abilities for the Elementalist have now changed, and in fact many situations they become more potent. So Ring of Fire now does 3 stacks of burning, the Drake's Breath actually applies more burning than it used to, and the Flame Axe actually has a great deal of burning application on there, even the skill 5, like the Eviscerate. I think the Eviscerate should apply like 5 stacks of burning or something, like so that it feels big and weighty, but it's still that kind of power Condi hybrid that they want. But yeah, so maybe some Flame Axe will work in an Incineration Ellie build. That's a topic for another day though, once the patch comes out in a week. So yeah, lots of burning changes. Let's look at fire magic. They specifically say for the miners now, you are getting 150 power while you're in fire attunement, just straight up. This is a buff. This is better than what we used to get, which was a chance to burn people who are hitting us, and then that would slowly go up, which is terrible. The second passive is you do more damage when you attune to fire, and you gain a fire aura when you attune to fire. So it kind of actually picks up a little bit of that dead space that the original miner gave you. And then lastly, the third miner is still 10% more damage in fire attunement. I'm going to try and go as much as possible over just the changes rather than stuff that stay the same. On the master slot, there was a change to Pyromancer's training. Now, before we had in every line, earth, air, water, and fire, a trait that said, get reduced cooldowns while you're in this attunement, and that was always 20%. They've all been universally buffed to 33%, so it's even easier now for your staff Ellies to maintain their friggin' lava fonts. In fact, now that that's 33% instead of 20%, I'm curious if we'll actually get, like, overlapping. Will we get another lava font down while the previous one is still up, so you'll get like that double tick? That'll be kind of interesting. And again, this is all actually kind of sad to me, because it seems, for at least the PvE side of things, for dungeon side of things, it's just encouraging a hell of a lot more staff usage rather than anything else. But yeah, that's across the board. So the air ones are 33% faster, the earth ones and the water ones. This is actually now against power overwhelming, which previously we saw as an adept, and it's now a master. So power overwhelming is get a bunch of condition damage if you have a bunch of power, and you can actually use power overwhelming along with an earth trait too to stack incredibly high condition damage. And yeah, that kind of screams incineration Ellie to me, but we'll see. I'm actually really happy to see power overwhelming has moved. As I expressed in my original critique, it was really stupid. They had us competing in the original slot, in the adept slot. Hey, do you want to have really long lasting burns and burn on your critical hits and burning stacks intensity, or a little bit more condition damage based on a stat you might not have even built? Power Overwhelming was just not a good trait. It was up against a much better Condi trait for the Condi players, and that was that. Well, now it's not competing against that. You can take both and have a more good-feeling burn build. Lastly, nothing changed for Grandmaster since last we saw, except the Blind on Burn trait has a 3-second internal cooldown, and that is matched with the Inflict Burning cooldown on the original one we saw in the minor slot. So they did, before on the previous stream, say they were hoping to unify them, and they did. Alright, quickly let's look at air. Now the passive for air that used to be 10% more movement speed while in air has gone up to 25%, so that's cool. It also means you really don't care about Signet of Air as a utility skill so much anymore, but this is cool. It actually is going to feel more weighty when you swap into air attunement specifically to move around quicker. The other stuff is exactly the same, and probably one of the most exciting changes, it was really hard to see actually because they moved off of this panel so fast. Ferocious Winds. This was before kind of a terrible trait. It was gain ferocity for your healing power. Just awful on so many levels. This has now changed. Ferocious Winds gain ferocity based on 7% of your precision. Nice. So a little bit of the lost damage you're going to see from Elementalist in a later line, specifically with water magic. We're actually recouping here. Ferocity based on 7% of your precision is very, very cool, and I was very happy to see that. The trait actually makes sense now, so yay. Equally, in the master slot, they kind of had this really dumb trait as well, where they had in fire, it's still 10% more damage while in fire attunement, and you cool down 33% faster. And in air, it was cool down 33% faster, and get 150 ferocity. And I think mathematically the devs just slapped that on there and they think that makes sense, but it's actually a huge nerf to what it used to be, which was 10% flat damage. Well, now it's been changed. It's gain 190 precision while in air attunement. So it's all based on that kind of idea that air attunement is based on crits, but 190 precision is worth a lot more than 150 ferocity. And when you consider as well, like, the option to take Ferocious Winds in the first slot, pretty cool. And then lastly, Grandmasters, I believe, are the same as we saw before. Bolt to the Heart has had a change. They've now recognized it is Grandmaster status, and it's more damage, 20% more damage to foes below 50% health, in line with the Necromancer and the Thief trait. This is great. This is one of those things. Across the board, you've actually been seeing a lot, especially on air magic, things the players have reacted to and asked for, and specifically, I know I critiqued, they've actually listened to, and they've changed, and that's really cool. The next one is Lightning Rod, which remains unchanged, and Fresh Air. Difference with Fresh Air, though, is it no longer has a cooldown associated associated with it. So there's no internal cooldown. You could go air attunement, fire attunement, air attunement, water attunement, air attunement, earth attunement, air attunement, like instantly, very, very, very quickly. So that's kind of cool, and you get a lot of lightning strikes off. Very excited to see how fresh air and spiky builds work once that's come out. Earth I was excited to see because I've always thought it was an interesting line. It just needs a little bit more refinement. There's very, very, very little change here. In fact, one of the really exciting traits that they'd originally talked about was a minor that meant you took like significantly less damage from foes within close range to you, and that's been nerfed to just you take 10% less damage from foes within close range to you. So they're not going to be anywhere as tanky as I thought they were going to be, and a lot of it's just kind of mad now. So now Earth Attunement is my least enjoyed line. Going to water, this is where I think one of the more fun changes has occurred. Aquatic Benevolence has been nerfed. It was previously giving you 25% higher outgoing heals to other people. Now they're just making it 15%. So it's a nerf. Combined with the Ferocious Winds change, it's another big nerf. It almost seems like Elementalist have just flat out been nerfed in the healing department, though it doesn't have much of a place in the game anyway. But the one thing that stands in defiance to this is a new Grandmaster. Now, last time they previewed the system, there was a Grandmaster that was deal 2% more damage for boons on you. I was really excited to play Elementalist in a variety of formats with this. It could have led to some really interesting plays where you try and burst an awful lot of boons up on the Ellies to then like spike a boss down. You rotate into Water Attunement after dropping your Ice Bow or your Meteor Shower or something like that. Could have been really fun. On the other hand though, there is kind of a quirky cool thing. This is a new Grandmaster that affects your Soothing Mist, a kind of terrible regen you get while in Water Attunement. It makes it 200% stronger. So I believe they're saying that triples the effectiveness. So yeah, it's a lot stronger. If you take that Grandmaster now, maybe that passive regen you push out while you're in Water Attunement will have more influence and more effect. And this is particularly important because in Arcane, there is no longer Lingering Elements. So Lingering Elements was an Arcane minor that meant Soothing Mists stuck about for 5 seconds, even after you got out of Water Attunement. And then, you know, the downtime was much, much lower because you could get back in quite quickly. That no longer exists, so they've got a trait in there and they've tried to buff its capability, so you really have to camp in water to field that. I don't know how great the gameplay is going to be or whether that Lingering Elements is not going to be enough even in combination with this trait, but interesting changes at least as far as that's concerned. So that's Arcane, and I guess that's the last thing to talk about. Really not much change with Arcane. Lingering Elements went away and got replaced with Elemental Attuning, which is now a minor. For Grandmaster, your choices are Evasive Arcana, which is no longer being split for PvP, by the way, so it's going to be stronger in PvP. You've got Elemental Surge, which is the basically the Arcane trait that does all Arcane stuff. Reduces Arcane cooldowns, gives you more ferocity when you use them, makes Arcane skills inflict conditions. And lastly, the do more damage per boon on you. So, because that's the only flat damage thing, though, for pure DPS builds, I think we'll still be in Water Attunement for the more damage against vulnerable foes and then more damage while at high health. But you may have a bit more option there. This does mean it's not going to be such a clear decision whether you go Arcane or Water, I think, depending on your playstyle or other stuff that's going on. But yeah, so that's pretty much the change. Not too much. You know, they said, oh, Arcane's a lot better, and really it was just that main trait that everyone held in contention for Ellie that's now been changed. Alright, so apologies for spending so long on the Elementalist. These are the interesting things I saw from the Warrior. First of all the burst skills will have kind of a universal recharge now, no matter what tier of Adrenaline you pop them on. The Longbow has had all of its actual skills range increased. Again, there was a bunch of changes based on burning and condition and stuff. They specifically pointed out that the trait Peak Performance will give you 10% more damage on your physical utility skills based on how much adrenaline you have. So basically, if you have max adrenaline, your physical utility skills will do 30% more damage. And Rampage has become a physical utility skill, and you cannot use burst skills in Rampage anyway. So basically, the point here is, Rampage, you can get like a 30% damage boost, which is pretty cool. It's nice to see the final numbers actually put out on that, because that was something they talked about before. One thing I was not happy to see is in defense for Warriors, Spiked Armor has become a minor, which means that all defense specialized warriors will be pushing out random like procking retail, and considering like the Zerg bust video I did just recently, it kind of kills that. There's going to be an awful lot more retail going around all over the place. Defy Pain still exists as a Grandmaster. I've never really liked this trait. This procs immunity for free for the warrior without even having to think about it when they get low on health. I hate traits like this. For what it's worth, I think traits like this would be perfectly balanced. All traits that proc like powerful stuff just when you hit a low threshold, I think these would all be fine in my mind if instead of just procking straight away, they threw up like a context button on the screen that said, hit space now to activate a free Endure Pain or whatever, right? Like, so players actually, they got the ability to do this stuff from their traits, but they still actually had to react. They still had to have the intelligence and the reaction time and the fortitude to be able to proc this stuff. Like, so people weren't just getting free random passive things that are so powerful thrown off all the time. Like, I wouldn't feel bad if I try and burst down a warrior and he gets the traded Endure Pain if I knew he actually had to comprehend that he had to pop it, you know? Like, that would make me feel a whole lot better about a whole lot of traits like this. But whatever, that one's still in there just fine. They did talk about how Rousing Resilience, which is this trait that gives you a hell of a ton of toughness after you stun break, this actually comes with a heal now too. They didn't linger on the idea of it coming with a heal, but they did say it comes with a heal. They talked about Brawler's Recovery, which is when you weapon swap, you remove a condition. And it specifically specifies on there that this only works while you're in combat. Well, really, if you think about most conditions, well, the damaging conditions anyway, that you're probably going to want to cleanse most if you're not in combat, these conditions are putting you in combat, so it's really weird to me to think it's that it won't work to cleanse a blind or a vulnerability or something like that because you happen to be out of combat while it's on you. It's just something weird. And lastly, an interesting new trait, Might grants 10 healing power per stack. That's weird. I think it would be a really cool, interesting trait if this actually pushed it out to allies as well. Like, the might that warrior gave was pushing out 10 healing power. So it's 250 extra healing power if that warrior were to give themselves 25 might. It would be really cool if giving that 25 might to other people, though, also boosted their healing power. But yeah, kind of another curious thing there that also ties into this new warrior monstrosity that's going to exist that has both banner regen and shout heals at the same time. And now can get kind of crazy heal power too. Next, I want to talk about Ranger. This is where the live stream actually ended, so we didn't get too much. Here's some baseline stuff, though, and mostly I want to focus on traps, because these were really cool. Other skills, though, Guard actually no longer has a cast time, which does make it kind of an interesting skill now. So now you can just ground target wherever the hell you want to, just move your pet just instantly, like, duh, duh, duh. Will it see some more utility? I've heard that Shout Rangers with lots of things that proc on Shouts can use it, so maybe. Quickening Zephyr as well, QZ. This currently will reduce incoming healing on you, and this is because at launch Arena had like kind of a batch of skills that gave you quickness, but they were all supposed to have drawbacks. It kind of ties back to Guild Wars 1, where warriors who popped Frenzy would take tons more damage, and even that was so for a while in Guild Wars 2 also. The Ranger one was still had this weird downside, and if the Thief one does too still, then that's also probably going to get removed. I think the Thief one just drains them of all endurance, which they can get back pretty quickly anyway. But so now, instead of having a downside, Quickening Zephyr will also give Rangers super speed. So not only will we have, you know, super speed Rangers pummeling us with their 1500 range longbows, they'll also run away from us really fast or close the gaps, the tiny gaps that they actually have to close with such immense range, also very, very fast. Sounds like a fun skill anyway. They talked about spirits. Spirits absolutely no longer have a trait that allows them to move. They talked about purity of purpose. I wanted to see the Ranger spirits become a lot more like their GW1 predecessors, you know, that you would be planted down somewhere and have like an immense range, like over all their allies in the area, or even allies and enemies as it originally was. It doesn't really sound like they're doing that. However, they are now changing a little in that if you pop the actives on them, they get sacrificed, a lot like original Guardian Spirit weapons. So it would have been interesting to see what they said about Guardian Spirit weapons and how they're distinct from these guys. Obviously, they don't proc out passives, though, so there are distinctions there. But they gave us some examples. So, like, Storm Spirit will be an AoE 3-second daze, which is pretty immense. And will actually, there's a trait for Rangers to increase daze duration as well, for example, so that should be quite fun. And one of their traits too means that various spirits will actually start pulsing boons out too, and it gives them more health and even longer range on their abilities. They're like that active, so that's what's going on with spirits. Traps now have an arming phase. Traps, there is no longer a trait to throw a trap. You always place the trap down beneath you. And there's an interesting trait that says offensive traps will apply 2 seconds of cripple, and all your traps have 60% increased condi duration, which is pretty huge. You know, if you're running that in a game type where you can use food, that's 100% condi duration on your traps, like straight away, just from eating some koi cake too, which is the cap. But what's interesting is it says offensive traps apply 2 seconds of cripple. What's a non-offensive trap? What are they talking about? Frost trap? Well, actually, they specified here that frost trap is getting base damage added to it. So what are they talking about, offensive traps? Well, there is now a defensive trap because Healing Spring has become a trap. So this suddenly opens up a lot of interesting gameplay. This is the way they've made it sound, okay? You drop the trap, and while it's arming, if you move out, so you drop it and you run out of it, you're going to be just fine. It won't activate. Then you can walk back into it when you're low on health, and it will heal you up. So you can kind of like bug an area. You can set an area up in your favor, then drag someone in World vs. World, for example, over and like get this sudden free heal for yourself. And you can even drop the first trap, engage in a fight, and then run into it and heal yourself, and then, oh, your trap's off cooldown again, like really, really quickly. Even more interesting than that as well, though, is like allies can also proc that trap. So this isn't like we have to let enemies run into it and do a weird thing. It's like you yourself trigger it. So if an ally then is running through World vs. World super low, they could accidentally stumble onto some kind ranger's trap who'd laid it, you know, a few seconds before and disappeared over a bluff, and this thing will just save their life, cleanse them condi. Like, this could be very, very, very cool. So that's what's changing with Healing Spring, and I really like the idea of, you know, like a lot of rangers setting up a whole ton of these things, and then you bait people into a big fight, and you drag them into this just huge area, this minefield that's filled with Dragon Hunter and Ranger traps that just completely swings things in your favor. Last thing on Ranger before I move to Engineer, which had a lot of substantive stuff, was the Ranger Resurrect trait, actually. Will now, when you press F to res someone, it's going to cast for free Search and Rescue, which is the ability that makes your pet res an ally. So it's actually you and your pet is going to res that person. Now, questions about whether this trait is going to be good to take in that slot over other traits, or questions about how fast it's going to, any kind of balance stuff aside, I think the flavor of this is perfect. This is so cool. What kind of ranger isn't gonna feel awesome like having their pet help them res someone up? Like that's a very, very cool res trait. Probably my favorite in the game at this point. Alright, so I'll finish up with Engineer. Engineer, as we knew from the previous stream, had a whole ton of work in progress stuff. Well, they're now done with this work in progress stuff. A lot of it has stuck. So, for example, the nade kit. Okay, nade kit is 900 range, and it no longer has fields on it. It's no longer a poison field. Your really long-ranged field option, like applying option, is now the mortar kit, which has become a kit, just as they described before. They actually said also that the AoE mower morph that they showed off on the previous live stream, almost as a joke, is actually staying. So, Elixir X users who use their F5 will get to throw mowers out of them, which is just absurd to me. There's also been some other baseline changes. Elixir recharges pretty much across the board have been reduced. In fact, recharges for pretty much every single NG utility have been dropped, and this is because NG has always really suffered from the fact that their kits are just too good. Like, I always find this when I'm playing NG. I run triple kits. I run bomb kit, tool kit, nade kit. And occasionally I'll swap to like super speed rocket boots, or occasionally I'll swap to maybe a single turret or something if I want to blast. But really, not often do I swap out of those three mainstays. So you try and incentivize those other skills. A lot of their cooldowns have been reduced, which is pretty cool. And when you think of elixirs and HDH, that means you're getting more benefit out of certain other underused traits. They showed us the new medkit. This video will have had Heart of Thorns footage from me pretty much the entire time, but right now you'll see Engineer stuff going on. This was the only gameplay they showed us on the whole stream. So you can see the medkit there. They showed us the way that the skills are basically working. That pylon idea they had before is no longer a thing. You kind of get a auto attack on the medkit that pushes out like a wave heal, and it will heal people for more if they have a lot of boons on them, and the rest of the skills on the medkit are actually applying a variety of boons. So one of them's Fury, one of them's Regen, the skill 5 is Resistance. They also have a really cool thing going on with the heal kit, where the skill 2 will remove damaging conditions from you, like burning and poison and bleeding. The skill 3 will remove like debilitating conditions from you, like weakness, and the skill 4 will remove movement impairing conditions from you, like chill and cripple and slow. And then the skill 5 is resistance. It's just like screw all these conditions and then none of them matter. So that's actually really fun. I like that setup, and your allies can run over them too, get a bunch of boons, get resistances, get cleanses, and then you smash the skill 1 out on them to heal them up. There's actually a lot of engineer healy type stuff, but I'll try and go through this in order. They did show off the mortar kit too. The skill 5 on the mortar kit is a heal field that also counts as an elixir. So this is a very rare, or the only example, of what is usually a utility skill class appearing on a weapon skill. So if you take HGH and stuff, like traits that should be affecting your utility skills, your elixir utility skills, these will also affect your skill 5 on the mortar kit, which is kind of interesting. The mortar kit as well, it was later explained, the F5 is the orbital strike we saw before, like a mini Skyhammer cannon. 1500 range, huge base damage on it, and a blast finisher. On top of that, and this is probably the most exciting thing for me about Engineer at the moment, on top of that, there's a trait that means it will strike twice. So you get kind of this orbital strike that will slam down double for people fleeing, running far away from you. Makes me think of Karthus from League of Legends, who is a champion I mained for a long time and friggin' love. I love the idea of these orbital strike glassy engineers that hammer down these massive hits on people who are unsuspecting. Even better than that, later on they described another trait, which was after you evade an attack, the next utility belt skill you use, which this orbital cannon is, will instantly recharge. So you can orbital cannon someone, and then do it again, and then you can orbital strike someone, and then do it again. So you can just have these huge things that go bang, bang, bang down like miles away from you. Great synergy with the idea of the mortar kit too. Like this really long-range, heavy slamming damage, slow, is something the game doesn't have right now. You know, the other form of really long-range damage we're seeing at the moment is on the Ranger that does it very differently through projectiles and lots of very fast hits. So this should be really cool, and I love the synergy across these multiple traits over different lines. But yeah, the mortar kit's pretty much how you'd expect. There's lots of big fields. You can trait it with the new version of Kit Refinement too, which gives you even an ethereal field too, and just lots of fun little stuff like that. The flamethrower trait that gives you like a really boring amount of might and is nowhere near as cool as it sounds like it should be, is actually giving you stability now, and it's up against some strong traits too. So that's Juggernaut now. It gives you stability, very nice. They talked about how there's a trait that gives you benevolence, but only while you're on the med kit. To look at Supply Crate now, because it's become a turret, Supply Crate inherits all turret bonuses, like from your traits, but also you can detonate the Supply Crate for a triple blast. So you could do something, and when you summon the Supply Crate, it's still a blast. So Supply Crate on its own is 4 blasts. So if you had a water field somehow, you could easily toggle into Medkit with this Benevolence trait, drop a Supply Crate, and like quadra blast in it, and heal people for a whole ton. Not to mention there's another trait that means when you, the engineer yourself, get healed, that then like dissipates and gives healing to everyone else around you even more. Massive heals. The Supply Crate F5 too is dropping a whole ton of medkits, and you could double up on those and have like these enormous medkit fields. Bunker Down now is dropping medkits. It's crazy the amount of heals that ArenaNet are offering engineers at the moment, and I'm very curious to see whether that will ever have a place on something. Another really awesome trait for the engineer, they just keep coming, is Lock On. This is basically going to make thieves hate them. It means that if you manage to hit someone who's in stealth, like, I don't know, spamming bombs around your feet as someone comes in to try and get an engage on you, it will apply like 6 seconds of revealed onto that player who was stealth, and then also 10 vulnerability. So engineers have a really good way from spamming their nades and you know, just trying to protect themselves. If they get a lucky hit on someone in stealth, then they can de-stealth them, and this is more counterplay to stealth, which I'm very happy to see, even though I don't really play much engineer myself. Now, one final really awesome trait, and this is what I'll end the video on since I've been talking for so long, is a trait that allows engineers to overcharge their gadget skills. This is up against the trait that allows you to like double up on F abilities. So, you know, I'm looking at the 4 times orbital strike, and I'm like, how can any other trait compete with this? And at first this seemed kind of boring. It's just your gadget skills recharge 50% faster. but then also they overcharge, so they do more now. So gadget skills are stuff like rocket boots and slick shoes. So they said, like, if you pop your slick shoes now, they kind of have a bigger range, and they'll splatter for longer. And they even say rocket boots, you can overcharge your rocket boots to make yourself go further. Now, isn't that pretty crazy? Isn't one of the big reasons that they are getting rid of super speed rocket boots because they can't design maps with that in mind all the time? People are breaking out constantly, and especially with Heart of Thorns and masteries and preventing players from getting to certain areas if they don't have the right masteries. Super speed rocket boots is probably breaking a lot of things. So they say, alright, we're going to get rid of it, we're going to change a lot of the combat, and this is one of the reasons we're doing it. And then they give engineers a trait that gives them the further the super speed rocket boots back, in a sense, anyway. Now, obviously, it's not going to be so crazy. Maybe it'll be just like swiftness rocket boots. But still, it's better than what we ultimately will have with those movement changes. Man, that's a lot of stuff. And I think there's probably quite a few things as well that shocked me or interested me I've not really talked about. But there you go, guys. This video has been way longer than I thought it was going to be. Maybe it's a good thing the stream crashed. That's a summary for you guys, though. We're about to roll into the onslaught of E3 news as well soon. So get it while it's hot. And at some point, I will update the link in the description to give you guys ArenaNet's uploaded video, which will have further information like the Ranger and stuff. So yeah, cheers, guys. Don't forget, this will be coming out next week. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you thought, and I'll see you next time.